And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 99th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 432nd episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, October 25th, 2018. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Martin takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Tuesday night when IU tweeted out a picture showing a new Hoosier wearing the gold practice jersey, Romeo Langford. A couple weeks ago, I reserved this space to laud Juwan Morgan for being the first Hoosier to wear the gold practice jersey this season after what his coach described as, quote, dominating play in practice. It's exactly what you want, your senior leader setting the tone to start the season. So why is it a big deal that Indiana's talented freshman, who we all expected to win the gold jersey at some point, was the first one who took it away from Juwan? Well, because it's exactly what Romeo said he was going to do. As Juwan informed us all at Big Ten Media Day, Romeo was not happy about falling behind Juwan in the gold jersey standings the first time around and vowed to take it from him in the future. Since it's fairly safe to assume that the senior captain Morgan didn't just start coasting in practice, it's also fair to assume that Romeo had to elevate his play to rise up and earn the jersey. And that, to me, says a lot about Romeo's competitiveness and maturity, even at this early stage in his freshman season. And when you combine that with his athletic gifts and basketball talent, you have the recipe for a freshman who appears ready to be a star from day one. You also have the makings of a year-long battle for that gold jersey that will compel Indiana's two best players to bring their A games every day in practice. That will only serve to make each better and raise the ceiling for how high one of college basketball's best duos can carry this deep, talented group of Hoosiers. Okay, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Jeff Brom of Girls Youth Sports Coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and one of the nation's most accomplished bracketologists.
Andy Bottoms, the nation's most accomplished bracketologist.
He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your Bottoms line from the last week in IU basketball?
Well, I would say a couple things. I mean, one, it's Romeo's birthday. So, I mean, what better gift could he get than to be we wearing the gold jersey and be the recipient of the banner moment? So that obviously a huge honor.
A dream come true for him, I'm sure.
His birthday. Yes. Among his many accomplishments, I'm sure this will rank among them. So that's exciting. I was surprised to hear episode 99 of the show. So on episode 100, we'll essentially serve as the post-game show for the exhibition game next week in the season that we have anticipated as much as just about any other, I think, that we've done the show. So that'll be a cool milestone to hit for the radio version of the show. And quite honestly, I was going to go the same place you did with the banner moment, the shot of Romeo wearing the jersey shooting into the end where all the banners hung and IU putting that out was pretty cool. And I think, for all the excitement that there's been about him, for what he can do on the floor, I think a pretty amazing honor because, as Archie's talked about all the things that go into earning the gold jersey, it's, Romeo certainly comes in known for his scoring, but there's a lot more that goes into it to earn that gold jersey, at least based on everything that we on the outside know about the things that they look at that go into it. And like you said, I think that's a pretty amazing sign that he has put his mind to something that quickly and been able to accomplish it. And I'm sure this was one of many battles in the war that will go back and forth between those two over the course of the season. But certainly a cool thing for him, and I think a great sign for the program. And again, we find ourselves trying to read a whole lot into something that is not actual, on the court game basketball. But this is the last time we'll need to do that. We'll actually have games to talk about in a week.
That's right. And Andy, we will not have our usual co-host with us tonight as Ryan is taking the evening off. Whatever will we do in his absence?
Almost impossible to replace no matter who you get.
Is that so? Well, we asked our usual fill-in co-host, Coach Tonsoni, to join us, but he has bravely made the trek north to Minneapolis to watch the football Hoosiers try to salvage their season against the Gophers this weekend.
Bring it on.
Godspeed, Coach. So with Ryan and Coach both out, we decided to throw caution to the wind and reach for the stars. This is an IU basketball podcast by the fans and for the fans, after all. So who better to fill in with the season right around the corner than one of the most loyal and enthusiastic supporters of IU athletics out there?
Dan Dockich.
No, definitely not. Our special guest tonight is the man behind the most followed and beloved IU fan Twitter account. He's a co-host for the Indy Stars podcast, Mind Your Banners, and he puts on one hell of a Hoosier hysteria tailgate, to which I can now personally attest. He is Chronic Hoosier.
Can a brother get some coupons?
Chronic, welcome back to the Assembly Call. How excited are you for actual basketball to be played in Simon Scott Assembly Hall a week from tonight?
I don't even think I've got the words to express it. I'm always really excited this time of year. It's just great to know that you're going to be in the hall, in single digit days. But when you take the particulars about this team, especially Juwan senior year, Romeo's arrival on campus, and as we were talking about before the show, there's a whole boatload of guys who I'm really excited to watch kind of grow and develop, as well as continue their Hoosier careers. I cannot wait. I absolutely cannot wait for it to start. And I'm thrilled to be here for the 99th show.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to have you. We always enjoy your appearances. So here's what we're going to talk about this week. Real games are coming. As we said, that means it's time to make some hard choices regarding the rotation. We'll give you some of our thoughts on that. Last year, Indiana's strength was clearly its defense. What about this year? Will the offense or defense lead the way? We'll discuss, and then we will discuss the latest on the college basketball fraud trial, what the verdict means, and our thoughts on seeing Indiana's name pop up in that sidebar conversation, and then we will answer your questions. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Real quick, before we get to this week's top story, I want to remind you about the best way to shop online for great deals on IU basketball and football tickets. Just remember this URL, iutickets.shop. It will take you right to SeatGeek, where you can immediately find the best deals on IU basketball tickets, other sports tickets, concert tickets, and more.
Can a brother get some coupons?
Yes, Chronic, thank you for asking. As a matter of fact, you can get a coupon. Just use the promo code ASSEMBLY to get $20 off your first purchase. And when you use that URL, iutickets.shop, we actually get paid a commission for referring you. So it's a great way to support the show.
That's the coolest thing ever.
We agree. So again, when you need to buy tickets, the best and easiest way to do so is with the URL iutickets.shop. And remember the promo coupon ASSEMBLY for $20 off your first purchase. Again, iutickets.shop.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, Chronic. See, I didn't warn you, Chronic. That's one thing that's changed since your last appearance, is we now mine your old appearances for drops that we can play at opportune times when they fit the content.
We're still preseason at this point. We're not even in the exhibition season yet, and your soundbite game is already at championship level. I'm floored. I'm over here dying.
Okay, so Andy, before we get to that, I want to give a shout out actually to one of our longtime listeners, Adam Lehman. He sent me a message earlier today, said he and his wife just had their first baby on Tuesday, already wearing Hoosier onesies. So congratulations, Adam. We all of us here can relate with the excitement that you must be feeling. So we wish you guys the absolute best. Very, very happy for you. Andy, you sent an email earlier today when we were kind of going back and forth about topics that I thought was pretty interesting. You said, if we assume the early rotation contains Morgan, Romeo, McRoberts, Justin Smith, Devontae Green, Evan Fitzner, Race Thompson, and Robert Finnessy, that's 8. Maybe we can each pick a guy outside of those 8 and convince the others how they cracked the rotation. And my first thought when I read your list is, where's Al and Jerome? Because they both seem like guys that are going to be in there. And right there, you're already at 10. And that's with a lot of other guys.
My initial draft of the email had them in there as well. And then I was like, well, that doesn't really make sense. I think I don't remember if it was Podcast on the Brink that you guys had a question similar to this, where I think there was like 9, or you guys said 9. And I couldn't remember who the 9th was that you had. So I assume it was one of those guys, or did you have both of them in there?
I mean, it's hard to not have both of them, but I think certainly you have to expect Al to be there because he has the experience and just because he's, one of the 4 ball handlers that's on the roster. So he's a guy that I would expect to be in the rotation early. And Jerome is so talented, you would expect him to grow into it as the season goes. But, it is, you see that question and it really kind of puts into perspective just how deep this roster is. So let's get your thoughts on it. Let's get Chronic's thoughts on it. I mean, you take those 8, and I guess to me, I would add Al there because I think he's clearly going to be in the rotation. But
I think that's fair. I had both of them, and then I was like, well, I can't put 10. So I figured we could just debate who we thought, if there was a 9th, who we thought it would be.
All right, so then maybe let's kick it to Chronic first. Chronic, do you agree with that, with those 9? And then who do you think the next guy would be?
This has been something I've struggled with since, honestly, in earnest, since Fitzner's announcement that he was coming. It's going to be really, really tough to figure out who's going to get left behind in the rotation this year, at least at this point. That may well clarify a couple weeks into the season. That's the thing about this roster, though, is I think it's got the dynamics that it can give Archie so many different looks. I wouldn't be surprised. And I was thinking about this today because I knew you guys always bring great discussion, and kind of anticipating where we may go with this. I could very well see Archie really putting the gas on when it comes to the defense and guys who aren't just absolutely flying everywhere, guys who he's just going to have so much flexibility in how he chooses to line them up. And I was thinking as we were likely coming to this topic, I honestly don't know. Perhaps Jake Forrester. There's always the issue with Duran's injury. Like that could self-resolve. It could be something that lingers for a while. It could be something where perhaps he's a go early on, but just not quite back yet. And Archie takes more time to ease him in. But then you also wonder when the situation with Duran arose last year, I don't think anybody really saw Justin Smith making the leap that he did over the course of the season. And with the amount of talent that's on this roster and the depth of it, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised as well if one of those guys who you think maybe going to be in the back end of the rotation line ends up progressing at a rate that nobody saw coming, and bring something to the lineup that Archie just can't keep on the bench any longer. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I tell you, it makes the opportunities that guys get early in the season in games like against Chicago State and Montana State so important, because for some of those guys that are toward the end of the bench, they've really got to show. I mean, obviously it's going to be based on practice, but, in games, they're going to have to show that they're ready for the bright lights to kind of stick in there as the rotation starts to shorten. But, I mean, Andy, what do you think as you look at it? I mean, Jerome seems like the next obvious guy, but you never quite know what to expect from a freshman. And yet he's probably one of the 3 or 4 most talented players on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, he's the one that kind of seems the most obvious, just because I think when you look from a talent perspective. But that being said, is it that clear that, they really, I don't want to say need another offensive option, but I think that's, kind of the interesting piece about that. I don't know if this is probably an answer that I would have felt least likely to say a little while ago, but it does feel like there's some good vibes around Clifton Moore. I think Juwan had a couple things to say about him at Big Ten Media Day. I feel like where, we kind of talk about Race Thompson as essentially like, his redshirt year, how important that is to him. I think what we may look back and see is that what happened with Clifton Moore is kind of the same thing. I thought he showed a few things in the scrimmage at Hoosier Hysteria, just from an activity level standpoint. So I'm a little bit intrigued by him to see if he could work his way into there. I think he or Forrester probably become, maybe an energy guy to give him 5 minutes off the bench and maybe 8 minutes on a given night. So he's a guy that I'm at least kind of intrigued by right now. Whether he can really make that kind of jump and do it, I don't know, but he's had a year in the system to both learn what Archie wants to do and, really put some weight on, which was an issue for him coming in. But from a skill standpoint, he's got an interesting skill set compared to some of the other guys that are in the mix there, it feels like.
Let's hit this really quickly, but I've gotten this question more than I anticipated, but it's basically people asking if Indiana should go to a platoon system, kind of like what Kentucky did.
Oh,
and
God,
my response,
no,
I know, I just want to address it. My response to that is, I mean, I don't like that, number one, but also number two, it's not a roster stocked with 5 stars. Like you can't just roll out your second 5 and treat that like it's a starting lineup. I mean, Indiana has depth, but they all have to work around Romeo and Juwan, and hopefully Justin kind of puts himself in that same category. So it's not where you're just going to like, it's 2 5s of equal or almost equal talent level. So I just want to, I mean, Chronic, I'm assuming you agree with that. I just want to put that to bed because I've gotten that question more than I ever would have anticipated.
Honestly, and so much of it, one, I think it's just a terrible strategy as a whole. 2, there's a connotation of Calipari's whole branding strategy that, we're so great, we're just going to platoon out 2 5-man NBA rosters at a time. No, I think it's terrible. I think but I'm not saying that Archie doesn't have, I think you're right. It's not the talent level that you're going to be able to see that. I do think, however, you may see situations where there's going to be a lot of combinations at play. And maybe you'll see combos that he likes in unison or in combination together that, maybe that's, it's kind of like a hockey when they do line changes. Sometimes there's key pieces to each line that you want to get out there, no matter where the line rotation falls. Perhaps that's something you see where maybe he's platooning, whether it be the backcourt, whether it be, who knows? that would be about as close as I would imagine Archie would ever come to that type of substitution pattern, though.
I don't think I've ever seen the chat mob just absolutely trash a question as much as they just trash that question. Okay, no platoon.
I think
very well taken.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I agree. I think the good thing about it is, I mean, the fact that the talent level is at a place where that is even a remotely rational discussion point is. I mean, if anybody had brought that up last year, you would have thought they were insane. So, I mean, it's good.
Yes.
So I will choose to look at it in a positive way, that is even a discussion that someone could reasonably ask, but I would agree. I just don't see that happening. I don't think you're going to see a time when one of Romeo or Juwan is not on the floor, barring a blowout.
Yep. Okay, coming up on the assembly call, last year Indiana was forced to hang its hat on defense because the offense just wasn't very good. With both figuring to be much better this year, will either stick out as a bigger strength for Indiana as we go through the season? We will discuss. Stick with us here on the assembly call. All right, and first segment is over. Hello to everybody watching live. Awesome to see you all here. Awesome. So Chronic, we are still live now to all the YouTube folks.
Really?
I'm actually in the process right now of trying to get myself off my personal account and onto my Chronic account so I can join the chat mob. I do need to set the record straight, though. I am still, to this day, I am still really I saw my crock pot this week and I got upset at myself. I'm really disappointed in my level of performance at this year's Hysteria Tailgate podcast. I forgot spoons, for crying out loud. Like, how are you going to serve sides and not even bring spoons? I'll get better. I will get better.
I thought it was great. It was my first experience. I thought it was great.
And I didn't have whiskey. I mean, what kind of...
I mean, that's alarming, but that's
well, we wouldn't have been able to drink anyway beforehand. So it's okay, but we'll do it. Maybe we'll do it for a game later this year.
We'll save it for the post-game meetup.
Yes.
There you go.
So one of the things that we've been kind of reserving this first break segment for is inducting folks into the chat mob. And we have another special induction tonight. We've inducted Megan in, Brian is in, and tonight we induct Chad Schwartzkopf into the chat mob. Congratulations, Chad. It is an honor to be able to induct you. Hopefully at the end of the night, Chad is going to come on for a little assembly call after dark, so we can kind of talk with him, get to know him. Let me know if you didn't get the link that I sent you, Chad, but his activity, his presence in the chat mob has been awesome. Kind of when the YouTube chat really got going, Chad was in there, one of the people who's here every Thursday night, always bringing up good points, always just keeping the conversation going. And that's, something like the chat mob doesn't work unless you have a lot of people with great enthusiasm, great dedication. And Chad, you definitely have that. So we really appreciate it. And awesome to have you in the chat mob. So
congratulations.
This was the most ridiculous ordeal of my life.
That's how Ryan indoctrinates people.
And I'm officially in the mob. Here we go. I'm on.
Chronic is on. Okay. I'm interested to see what the chat mob is like after actual games, because it's been hopping this off season for Thursday night shows. I imagine for games, it's going to be especially big wins. It's going to get kind of crazy in there. It's going to be awesome. All right. So let's see, Andy, we need to do some math.
Oh, no. Try to do math.
Okay. So that segment,
I was going to say, you have to give me the number from the first part. It becomes really hard if you don't do that.
16, 17.
16, 17,
16, 17.
We got 24 minutes. Is that right?
24 minutes. Yes.
I'm good at the math. It's the remembering how much we have is the hard part. I think 743, 1041.
Wait, what was that?
743, I believe.
743. So 743 total. So take 20 seconds off of that.
723.
723. Okay. Sweet. So okay. So Chronic. So we've got 7 minutes and 23 seconds for this segment. It's always our shortest segment. So I was just going to talk offense, defense. I mean, assuming that you guys think that's a good topic. Which do you think will be the strength? Because they're both rated pretty evenly on KenPom.
No, I'm here for it. I officially dubbed this the Rick Pitino segment.
Oh boy.
Because it comes and goes before you know it.
Everything that happened at Louisville is disgusting and egregious.
I mean, how long did you spend mining this is phenomenal.
I think that's what I find the most concerning is the amount of old footage he needs to go through to find some of these. Now, in your case, you've certainly been on from time to time, but it would probably be a little bit easier to like narrow down the whatever. But on some level, I just envision you sitting there during the day, listening to old episodes, and then being like, "Oh, I got one." I'm not sure. That's how I like to envision you during the day.
There's a process. It's more efficient than you might imagine, but probably less efficient than it needs to be. So, put it
while we're airing this out, let me get it out here too. One of my guilty pleasures is going through old video of all the IU beat guys and finding just the right clip for GIFs.
Mm-hmm.
So I do it. I absolutely do this. But I don't have nearly the stash you do. I'm super impressed because I know what
I've got photos of him in a sombrero.
All these are from one episode with you.
That was Tijan. I got photos of Tijan in a sombrero.
Yeah. Yep.
I've got photos of Tijan with an elephant now. My cachet of Tijan material has only increased. I will admit that.
That's good.
Proudly.
Apparently his Facebook account is like a treasure trove of
You have no idea. It's the greatest gold mine on the internet. That is truthfully. Some days I'm just down. I'm having a bad day. I will just see what's up in Tijan's life, and I'm over the moon. Just like that. It's awesome.
That
he
is
human
awesome.
sunshine.
All right, here we go. We got 7:23. Okay, let's do this. Okay, here we go. Let me get the right screen up here. Okay, here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts,
chat mobbers,
or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel. You will be privy to all of the between segment banner that doesn't make it into the radio show or podcast edit.
It gets all sorts of wacky.
It really does. Come get wacky with us on YouTube, youtube.com/assemblycall. I am Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and our special guest co-host, Chronic Hoosier. And guys, for this segment, let's talk kind of offense versus defense. Last year, Indiana was a team that, was certainly challenged offensively, quite inconsistent on that end. The defense didn't start out very good either, but as the season went along, that clearly became the strength of the team. And it's what we know Archie Miller wants to hang his hat on. But my question is, as we look at this season, with the prodigious offensive talents that Romeo Langford brings to the table and what we know Juwan can do, and now with Evan Fitzner to kind of improve the shooting and just more overall offensive talent than we had last year. And this question actually came to us from Scott inside of our community. He basically wanted to know, what do you expect to be more efficient, the offense or the defense? And according to the KenPom numbers, the offense is 27th in the preseason projections. The defense is 33rd. So Chronic, I'll go to you first. What do you expect to kind of be, what drives this team or its biggest strength? Or do you see a big enough difference between the two to, make it worthwhile to point out even?
I think I'm naturally inclined to lean towards the defensive side, simply because that's kind of Archie's MO. That's what he really has emphasized. He wants this team to be as a defensive first team. I think offensively it holds potential to be pretty special. I don't think you can overstate the addition of Romeo Langford and just what that could bring to the offense for this team. But also looking at guys like Evan Fitzner, the ability to stretch the floor out, to get that corner shooter back again. To bring Juwan some help down low, whether it be, through Justin Smith's developed game. I think the addition of Race Thompson is going to be amazing on both ends of the floor for this team. I think he brings a lot of toughness, but I was pretty impressed with some of the offensive moves he was able to show in Hysteria. And then you bring in the freshman. I mean, there's so many things at play here. I think offensively, the one thing that I'm really looking at the start of the season is just exactly how does the ball move around it? How do they distribute the scoring? What kind of chemistry can these guys achieve? And then, on a whole nother level along those lines, in what various combinations does that kind of morph and change a little bit? So I think the defense is probably going to be a little bit more known element going into the season, at least as we're prognosticating at the start of the season. But I think the offense could be pretty special as well. And more than anything, I think on both ends of the floor with the depth that he has and the talent across that bench, I would greatly expect to see tempo increase. And I would greatly expect to see the intensity on the defensive end be heightened at least a couple of notches from where we've seen it before, just because he's going to have the ability to keep fresh legs out there.
Andy, what do you think?
Well, I look back at what Archie's done over the course of his career, and his first 3 years at Dayton, the offense was better than the defense by a pretty wide margin. Now, I don't know, those teams weren't, one of those is the one that got to the Elite Eight. But some of those, I don't know how much that was, kind of carryover personnel and things like that. But then the last 4 years, so his last 3 years at Dayton plus last year, the defense was better. So I guess I'll go with that trend. If you look at the numbers defensively last year, where IU struggled, at least was ranked the lowest, was on the preventing offensive rebounds. I think the additional size, athleticism this year helps that. Certainly don't need to remind everyone that the 3-point defense was not good. And while there's varying arguments about how much the defense can really impact that, I would like to think that would be better. So I think the defensive numbers have a chance to take a decent jump with those, and certainly we would expect the offensive numbers to jump as well. For some of the same reasons that the 3-point shooting almost has to be better. Turnovers in the second year, assuming somebody grabs hold of the point guard role, get a little bit better. But if you look at last year, the defense has a 27 spot head start. I think the gap certainly closes, but I would say the defense ends up carrying the day again for Archie, and I think some of that could be there's not quite the talent level in the Big Ten. So if IU plays defense, this year, I know there's adjustments in the KenPom numbers, but I do think from a talent perspective in the Big Ten, a lot of teams jumbled in the middle, not quite the high end kinds of groups that were there last year.
Yeah. I think I agree with you, Andy. I just feel like I have a little bit more confidence in the defense, just seeing the growth last year. And look, we're all very excited about what Romeo can bring to the table offensively, but I think the offense has the potential to be really good. Like, I think this team has the potential to have a top 15 offense if the point guard play is good on a consistent basis, if the 3-point shooting improves. But I guess, Chronic, that's kind of where my question marks come with the offense is, how is the point guard play going to be? We all expect Evan Fitzner to be a 40+% 3-point shooter, but do we see the improvement from some of the other guys, that lifts that 3-point shooting up enough to give us, to give you the kind of efficiency that can start getting you into the, to the top 20, the top 15. Because I think it'll be better, but I don't know quite how much it'll jump up with the personnel Indiana has this year.
I would also like to add, as much as I'm looking for an improvement in 3-point percentage, probably the most obvious room for improvement on this team that could have a significant impact on the offensive numbers is their free throw percentage.
Yeah.
If these guys can just convert 7% more of their shots than what they hit last year at, I believe, what was that, 65, almost 66%. I mean, you start sniffing the 70s, even the low 70s, and you're adding a whole lot more points into the offense.
Yeah, and there's every reason to believe that will be the case. With the free throw shooting, you had Freddie McSwain taking 70 free throws last year. Deron Davis took a bunch. Who knows how many he'll shoot this year, but he should be better because he was a much better free throw shooter as a freshman. Andy, we have about 30 seconds left this segment. I mean, defensively, you feel confident with the defense. What's your biggest question mark about the defense entering the season?
I think it's still being able to, contain dribble penetration. I think what you and Ben Ladner talked about on the Monday show with some of the pick and roll coverages will be interesting to see how they do that, because that was really a problem, and that's such a big part of defense these days is trying to defend ball screens effectively.
Do you expect Indiana to kind of change up how they're doing that some?
I doubt it. You might see a few wrinkles here and there, but I think, a lot of times coaches at this point have a pretty good stance on how they want to handle those situations. Yeah.
All right. Well, and look, I think the one thing that we can all agree on is both the offense and defense should be better. And the ideal is for this team to be balanced on both ends of the floor. And hopefully that is what we see. All right, coming up, those of you listening on the radio Friday night, you may be switching over to high school football, so be sure to catch the replay on assemblycall.com. For everyone else, we're going to discuss the college hoops fraud trial and Indiana's name popping up in it next, so stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Beautiful. A bit of a shorter segment there. Okay.
I will say I did not go and watch the actual video of it yet, but even the audio stuff that you and Ben did, I thought was really, really good.
Thank you. Yeah, we got to get better at explaining it in a way that is good for the podcast. Because, like instead of saying here, and we were talking about that afterwards, instead of saying here, like actually describe what here means. But man, he is, that guy is a smart basketball fan. He does really good work. Yeah, no, it was good. If the Ringer doesn't hire him, they're making a big mistake, because he would fit right in over there. Okay, so next segment, we are going to discuss this trial. So Andy, Chronic, did you guys listen to Rob Doster's podcast?
I did on my way home today.
It was good.
I did not listen to the podcast. I saw his, I've been reading him throughout this. He just had that article yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, this morning, where he talked about the verdict that was, it was a given from the start. I thought he nailed it pretty well, honestly. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out exactly. I get why. I mean, I understand why it's same. You look at Al Capone. It's not the crime that you're committing. It's the federal violations, usually involving money, that end up being the easiest to prove, where you get convicted on. At the end of the day, though, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the whole end game was here, because there has to be something greater than just getting the guys they got. And it's certainly, even where we are now with the verdict in hand, there's still no meaningful reform to what's, ultimately the underlying cause of this corruption to begin with. So it's as clear as mud, honestly, even still.
That's a very uplifting description of all this. Okay, so I just want to kind of get a little bit of a roadmap for where we go with this segment, because I don't want to meander too much if we don't have like specific stuff to say about it. But I thought it might be interesting to at least cover that big picture stuff, and especially, I guess the one thing listening to Doster's podcast that made a little bit more sense is how they actually came to the verdict that they defrauded the schools, because essentially you have to look at it differently. The school is not the team. And even though the school still benefits, I guess like that made a little bit more sense. So maybe we can just kind of explain that. Chronic, you kind of come in with that point. And then, we got the question so much, like I don't want to make this a bigger deal than it is, because I don't think it's much of a story right now. But I think we should at least maybe kind of give our thoughts on, you see Indiana's name pop up in there. You've got Indianapolis radio hosts that are, I don't think we need to rehash things that he said, but we can at least address, maybe how that makes us feel, or just kind of what we think about that part of it. Because a lot of people ask, so we can at least give our thoughts on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I'm still trying to figure out how the state got so inflamed by it. I just can't quite put my finger on what type of wild speculation and innuendo broadcast from a major radio station would have caused this.
Indianapolis's #1 radio host, Dan Dockich.
There you go.
God, what topics haven't I covered on the show, Jerod?
And that was only one show
from one episode.
My God, I talk too much. Let's take a Quaalude next time before I come on.
Okay, so let's hop into this. And yeah, I mean, really what I'd like to do with that second part of it is, I guess just kind of put people's minds at ease, like try to, for anybody who's still like really concerned about it or worked up about it, just, let's cool it with the, with all that stuff. And then, we'll see how sometimes this segment's really long, but we have a lot of good questions. So if we get in and out of this segment relatively quickly, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
But let's at least address it. Here's my favorite.
And I would like to also kind of get into the way, just kind of the legal contours of how this even came up in the trial, because I think it's relevant. I think it's absolutely relevant to just how much weight and veracity you really have to put into, is this even something that we should be talking about?
I'm sorry, 2 funny quotes in the chat. Jay Horry says, can we rehash Steve Alford tonight too? That's funny. Chad says, Jerod, can we really be sure that Chronic is truly on the show tonight and this isn't all just drops? Can't.
No way to know for sure. I will say on the Alford thing, this is funny. I was listening to the 3-Man Weave podcast. I'm a little bit behind, but I was listening to their Pac-12 preview and I was taking a walk tonight. And they got to use they were doing before. I don't think they had gotten into the teams yet, but they always usually pick like their predictions for, player of the year, coach of the year, whatever. They said coach of the year, and so they threw out whoever they thought it would be. And then they talked about, they kind of like, one of them kind of jokingly threw out Steve Alford, and they're like, and I forget which one said this, but they're like, well, don't you typically have to exceed expectations in order to be able to win the coach of the year? So I was like, yeah, some would say that is an important part of it, as opposed to accumulating talent, but then like doing kind of what you thought or somewhere around there. So
He's a great coach.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Sure
is, Ryan. Okay. Let's get into the segment. Here we go. Okay. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and our special guest co-host, Chronic Hoosier. Remember that if you are a serious IU Hoops fan, then you need to be subscribed to our free IU basketball email newsletter.
There's a high-level operation going on out there.
You will get our six-banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our detailed post-game analysis emails once the season begins. This content is why more than 6,000 of your fellow IU fans are already subscribed to our list, and joining them is easy. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com.
Make no excuses.
Can we get some basketball, please?
Okay, back to talking basketball. Well, kind of talking basketball, because we've got this corruption trial that has been going on that's gotten a lot of attention. The verdict is in, and so we want to talk about this on kind of two fronts. We want to talk about the actual trial, the verdict, kind of what it means, the bigger picture, and then also talk about Indiana's very, very small involvement in it, but kind of what that means and what we think about that. So let's start, Andy, by, the trial is in, and you and I both listened to Rob Doster's podcast. And I think for anybody who might be having trouble figuring out how, these three guys, Jim Gatto, Merle Code, and Christian Dawkins, how they were actually found guilty of something that, seems like it's just normal everyday business in college basketball and that is an NCAA violation, I would recommend this podcast, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Essentially, it boils down to you have to view the school differently from the team, because it's really easy to look at it and say, wait a minute, how did Kansas, how are they defrauded out of this when they're trying to help them get players? But it's more from a school perspective, and it deals with like how scholarships are paid out, and it's a little bit complicated. I don't want to explain it all here, but I would recommend that podcast. But that really kind of illuminated for me how they came to the verdict that they came to. And it made it, Andy, I mean, you listened to that. Did it at least make it make a little bit more sense why the verdict came in, how it did? Because when I first heard it, I was kind of flabbergasted.
Yeah, and I think Matt Norlander and Gary Parrish talked about this as well. Norlander was at a lot of the trial, and so the attorney that Rob had on, Jason Belser, not to be confused with the former Colts safety, was on and basically walked through the general premise is that the school is using state funding to hand out scholarships and grants and things like that, and they would not have done that had they known the athletes' amateur status was compromised by accepting this money. I think that's kind of how I boiled it down as I listened to both of those, and basically saying they were duped into believing that the athletes would be eligible and wouldn't have any kinds of problems. Now that implies that they wanted to know, and the coaches wanted to, weren't willfully a part of it. But that's the gist of it, is that, state funding and government funding essentially for those things was being routed to people who should not have been eligible for it. I guess that's kind of how I boiled it down. I don't know if you kind of walked away with a similar thing, but I guess that's to me what the gist of it was.
And then, now there are two more trials coming up. And I guess the big thing to look for now is, do those trials actually happen? Do guys, take plea deals? And it sounds like if those trials, like what college basketball coaches probably want to happen is for those trials not to happen, because then not so much stuff kind of gets into the public record. So that's kind of the next thing to watch in all of this. Chronic, as you watched all of this happen, as you saw the verdict and have seen the coverage of it, what did you think about it? And kind of what do you think this means in the bigger picture?
I think the trial as a whole, I mean, this whole thing where the FBI is now getting into the seedy underbelly of college basketball recruiting is, I'm trying to figure out what the end game is here, because obviously organizationally, the NCAA hasn't shown any real interest in reforming what's really going on here. I mean, you have a you have a commodity that has an extremely high value in the athletic talent due to the NCAA's definition of amateurism and the fact that the schools make literally billions of dollars off of their backs and don't have to pay this talent. They very much are protecting of it. But at the end of the day, this trial does nothing. It's going to ruin some careers. It's going to open some people's eyes to what goes on literally at an unbelievable amount of schools across the country. And what I think what's funny, at least personally to me, is you look at some of the coaches reacting, and you know, some of the quotes like, "They paid that guy how much? Like, did they even see this guy?" But that's what happens though when you have a $1 billion industry and your labor is free. I mean, just because the NCAA says they're amateurs doesn't mean that the marketable value is now non-existent. You can't create a prohibition on something that has a value to it, an inherent value to it, especially something that's as high as a value as this is. You know, on the micro level here, yeah, I think Douster was spot on, at least in his article. I haven't had a chance to catch the podcast today. It's kind of sad at the same token too, because they have no problem extracting swift justice on the kids involved in this and some of the peripheral players. But when you look at the coaches, when you look at the teams, and I don't care what how you have to parse this to understand how the schools were the ones that were defrauded, they're also the beneficiaries of this illicit activity. You could say they're co-conspirators in it, in as much as it's their very employees who have been directly implicated and it has been proven in court. There's evidence showing that the schools know, or at least the teams, the coaches know exactly how this thing works. They continue to reap riches from it. So you look at DeSouza, he's immediately ineligible, or at least Kansas is withholding him because they know exactly how that's going to play out. And yet Kansas just gets truck along, start the season with a number 1 ranking, continue to put together, top ranked classes. And, Bill Self will be, perhaps hanging a banner before they even get to the point where the committee is going to consider investigating his involvement in it. And I think it's ridiculous the way in which this thing's playing out without ever addressing what's causing all of it. And what's causing it's because the NCAA doesn't want to play its athletes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that was kind of the hope that some people had, is that, from this trial and from everything that's happened, shine a light on what's going on and that you would see some real change and that some of that, would change for the better. And I don't know if we're going to see that. Do you think we will see a more emboldened NCAA now that, because of the information that they can get from the FBI, and because, people are certainly going to be a little bit more scared now that people are going to jail for stuff like this? I mean, do we think that they'll start to go after some of the bigger schools, or is there just too much money at stake and, just not something that they're going to want to do?
I think when you look at the history of the NCAA, especially as of late, and the way in which they've handled some of these major scandals, it probably amounts to a little more than a slap on the wrist at the end of the day. I think they realized after the Reggie Bush episode, when I say they, I mean the schools. And when I say the schools, you also have to understand the schools are the NCAA. It's a member institution. That organization is only going to do what its members tell it to do, and what they decide is in everybody's best interest. And especially when you start talking about blue blood programs like Kansas, and maybe not blue blood, but certainly blue chip like Arizona, for example. I don't foresee them doing anything that gets in the way of the cash cow, or that stops the production of their golden goose right now. And from what we've seen on Condoleezza Rice's commission, the way in which they're trying to restructure the summer circuit and all of that, it's really lipstick on a pig. I mean, it does nothing to address the fact that when you have a prohibition on players extracting any value for their services or even their name, image, and likeness, that doesn't just make the demand for those things go away. Especially when you see, until NBA salaries stop escalating, until people stop paying ridiculous fees for, the entertainment of watching these kids play, I think you're only going to see it, not only continue, but you're going to probably see it morph into ways that make it harder to detect.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and our special guest co-host, Chronic Hoosier. So, Andy, the other part of this that, IU fans have been looking at and people have asked me about is, Indiana's name popping up. And I think way back in, opening statements, they provided a list of names that could pop up. And I think Romeo Langford was on that list, but his name never actually popped up in the trial. But, the thing that happened recently, I think it came out on Monday, it was the 20th, but it seemed like IU fans didn't really catch wind of it until about 3 or 4 days later. In an article at the Kansas City Star, there was a quote, and this was from a sidebar, so it wasn't actually read to the gallery, wasn't read to the jury, but it was just a sidebar conversation where the defense attorney Schachter was reading a text from this guy John Lasko, and he basically said, "Hey, I'm in Indiana, and Coach Ostrom asked me for an update. They're super willing to do what it takes to recruit Silvio De Sousa. Is that something of interest for us?" So it wasn't actually a quote from Tom Ostrom. It was someone saying that Tom Ostrom said something else. And this has kind of gotten people concerned. What does this mean? Super willing is Indiana just as dirty as everybody else? Like it's, you can take that and your mind can run wild with it. You can also look at it the other way and be like, middlemen are middlemen. And a lot of times, in this people who kind of know how this stuff works have talked about how guys will try and play people off of each other and say whatever. So what I'm trying to say here is you don't really know much from this, but as you kind of looked at this, what did you take from this? Like, what does this kind of make you feel as an IU fan? Do you have any strong opinions on it one way or the other?
Yeah. I mean, I think this in and of itself didn't really make me feel much of anything, I guess. As you think about this, I think there's a lot of ways you could look at it and you could talk yourself into or out of saying this is symptomatic of nothing, or it's symptomatic of a larger issue. And I think, but I think based on what was there, the fact that IU was never really linked to De Sousa in any tangible way that I recall, at least, seems to make it a little bit easier to brush off. Now, the flip side of that is it's a little bit like, the argument for, Ryan's boy, Coach K and Zion Williamson and all that stuff. You've got stuff in the trial that comes up that says, the dad or the stepfather has his hand out for money from Kansas and other places, but then all of a sudden he just goes to Duke, and then you're supposed to assume that there's nothing going on. By a similar token, you've got IU, who's a big name Adidas school, and they're out there doing a whole bunch of stuff for other people. It also feels like a little bit of a leap to say there's not been any contact. There hasn't been any of that stuff that somehow involved IU. I think that's probably naive to assume as well, that any big time program didn't at least have discussions with these, middlemen as you described it. So, and you can kind of couch that however you want and say that really bothers me. I don't want my program to behave this way, or, you know what, I don't care. Everybody else is doing it. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And we're just going to, go on down the road and do that. And I don't really know how I feel about that part of it, quite honestly. Because the reality is, if the program was as clean as could be, which many people would kind of, it was one of the things that people bring up about Crean, there were no issues. And yeah, there are other things going on, but people weren't happy with the level of winning at that point. So it's a little bit hard to say, I want to run the cleanest program out there and do this and results be damned, I'm okay with it, when I'm not totally sure that that's true for a lot of people. And I think it's all of this to me has been hopefully eye-opening for people who don't follow it terribly closely about, how the sausage gets made. And you've got to kind of make your peace with, how involved you want your program of choice to be involved in it. So I guess to me, this issue in and of itself, not a whole lot. I think in the larger conversation, I'm not shocked to see IU or any big time school get somehow named in it.
Chronic, what do you think?
Looking at the particular quote, that question from the trial, I think what stands out to me is on its face, the very statement, or at least the very piece of evidence that they were discussing at the time, was hearsay. I mean, by definition, it's Lasko describing Ostrom's words to a third party. It's one of those things as well. And for those that aren't real super familiar with the way the law works, especially trial law, it's an evidentiary matter that's before the judge, not in the presence of the jury. He's trying to get something in. It wasn't admitted to the trial. I didn't see from the Kansas City Star article or anywhere else, I guess, on what grounds the judge denied it. He may not have said anything, just said it was simply denied. But when you look at the reasons in which it could have been, there's a reason that it wasn't, at least for purposes of how it was trying to be introduced to the trial, whether it was, whether it was hearsay, whether it was lack of probative value, relevance, who knows. That being said, though, I was kind of alarmed to see, Not that came out in the trial, because I think, like Andy said, I'm not surprised when any name comes out in a trial such as this. If there's a Power 5 school that at any point has recruited top 50 kids. What surprises me is just how broadly it got overblown, at least in the local media community. And not by all. I mean, obviously it became national news and people had to talk about it. All that being said, though, the thing that struck me most since I read that is I keep going back to March 7th, 2015. I don't know if if that date rings a bell with anyone. Final game of the regular season in 2015, Michigan State was coming in town. There was some scuttlebutt the night before on Friday that perhaps that would be Crean's last game, or that, perhaps he had made the decision that he was going to go look for greener pastures. I'd even heard so much as that perhaps the team had even been told that. And I was getting a lot of multiple sources were confirming kind of the same gist. And then we wake up the next morning and we find out that, lo and behold, there's Thonmaker, Matura Maker, and Thomas Bryant sitting behind the Indiana bench.
That is how you're a champion.
Yeah, that's exactly how you're a champion, is you get the top talent there when you need them the most, in the position that you most desperately need. IU got Thomas Bryant eventually. Most folks know the story with the Maker family, but it's always kind of struck me as odd how all that came together. And that's one of those where you get a glimpse perhaps at how the sausage is made. I don't know. We had an Adidas contract coming up about that time too. So, with what we now know, or what's at least been proven in the trial, what's come to light, unlike Coach K, I don't think it's just a blip. I don't think this is an isolated incident with just a couple of bad actors that have, spoiled the whole cart for everybody else. But I think this is probably how you see a lot of kids getting placed in college, to be honest with you.
Well, I think, even this discussion shows there's enough there that I think enough is known now. You can draw whatever lines you want to draw and make a compelling case to say anybody could be implicated in this in some way. And you could also, there's enough ambiguity that you could say, well, you don't know this. You can't prove any of it. And that's all by design in the way that this stuff has gone down. So it just is, whatever viewpoint you have, if you want to believe that a coach is clean and has no idea, like people want to believe about Krzyzewski has no idea, all of a sudden all of these guys, are there. They certainly have built a strong program, but there's, again, you got guys who everybody knows are asking, or who sounds like they're asking everybody else for money. And then all of a sudden they don't need that from you. And you act like you don't know that even any of this goes on. That's pretty hard to believe. But equally hard to believe that literally every single, Power 5 program is involved in it either. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and people are going to draw the conclusions they want to draw based on what they believe about different coaches and programs and assistants and shoe companies.
All right. Well, good conversation. This is obviously something that will continue. We're not going to solve anything here tonight, but just wanted to kind of get that out there, talk about it a little bit. And when there is more that comes out, we will be sure to talk about it here on the Assembly Call.
I felt like we had an amazing conversation on all levels.
Thank you, Archie. All right, coming up in our final segment, as we always do, we are going to answer more of your questions, including what is Chronic's favorite IU memory and our prediction for what will cause the first overreaction of the season. This should be fun. That's next. Stick with us. All right. Yeah, we were already at 18 minutes, so.
Yeah, that's fine.
I totally got lost in chat mob and then lost our chat here on the side of the Zoom. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's all good. That was 1804. So we have
9:56, right?
9:56.
Hey, did you guys catch Dan's show the other day when he was talking about that, by the way?
Yeah, I listened to some of it. I don't know why I decided to turn it on, but I
just
did.
So you could hear your shout out, apparently.
Oh, jeez.
You got shouted?
Yeah,
shouted at, not really shouted out from the way Jerod described it to me.
It was just dumb. Like he was talking about it in a way that was totally contradictory from how he had been talking about the same topic with Paul B. and Cardi a couple days earlier. And I was going to say something about it on Twitter, but I'm like, no, let me do him the respect of actually emailing him about it and just asking him, because maybe there's something I'm not seeing here. So I just emailed him and pointed out some of the quotes he had made to B. and Cardi and was like, this is a lot different from how you're treating this. I'm just wondering if I'm missing anything. And instead of replying to the email, he just went on like a little rant. He called us Crimson Call at first, which I thought was pretty funny. And it was ridiculous. He like started pulling up all the stuff that I like told him in like an email 3 years ago about my dad, like, you know, how he coached at IU and stuff. And it was real. It was, I don't know. It was strange.
Well, I thought he was breaking news about some kind of merger between us and Crimson Cast. I didn't know.
He just can't get Zimmerman out of his head. No, I started blowing up. I was in a meeting at work. Excuse me. And when he brought up Adam Estes, Adam and I were classmates at Culver together. He was a year below me, but I've known him for some time. And I also know he's pretty well connected around town, and he's certainly not lacking for resources. And all the accounts was he was getting slandered pretty hard. You know, initially it was just.
No, it was bad.
What was the story behind that? Because I didn't listen. I didn't listen to any of it.
Adams was previously in the finance business. He's got some interest in some other local businesses here in town, Upland, not the least of which. Nevertheless, he's pretty resourceful. Normally, if you see Adam, it's like when him and Jeff Overton love to run together whenever Ovi's in town. And it was certainly alarming to hear Dan, you know, and I understand he's pretty well connected in the basketball community in the state. But to hear Dan go after him by name, that's from what I understand. And again, I didn't hear it. But most of the people who were hitting me had said it was some pretty pointed comments that were rather slanderous.
Yes.
Like literally, legally, actually slanderous. And there'd probably be several parties who would be real parties of interest in that suit. Because it was pretty far reaching. And I was just kind of taken aback by that. I wanted to get your opinion on exactly how far off the deep end he went with that.
It was the deep end. I mean, it was like unhinged level deep end. Like, you know, to the point, I mean, if I'm assuming if these folks have lawyers and want to go after him, I mean, they could probably make a pretty good case for slander.
Adam doesn't have lawyers. He has law firms.
Well, there you go. So
like he's that type of resource.
Yeah.
He has his own plane.
Yeah. Well, anyway, enough about that guy. I've had about enough of him on all levels. All levels. All right.
Let's talk about where we can get those Tom Crean Georgia versus all y'all shirts. That's what we really need to talk about.
That's what we should start giving Chat Mob folks instead of the Chat Mob shirt. You get a Georgia all y'all shirt.
God.
Oh man.
That article was actually pretty good, but I was just like, I couldn't get over the picture of him in that shirt. I
think he's going to be so much more in his element at Georgia than I think it'll be a much better fit for him.
Yeah. I couldn't bring myself to read it. I'm still.
I struggle to read articles that he's a part of. I mean, you got your typical spin about how like the last 3 years, there was no alignment.
Yeah, you could start skimming it at a certain point, but it was, yeah.
Some of that stuff was just, and there was, there's one quote where he's talking about with the, texting back and forth with the women's basketball team about how to beat a zone defense that will.
Oh God. Oh God.
IU fans will read that and not.
Drive off a bridge. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all credit where credit's due. He truly is a master marketer of his program. I mean, he's like the P.T. Barnum of NCAA basketball.
Yeah.
Except P.T. Barnum also never had to scheme against his own.
Yeah, it was a lot about that and how he's trying to, do what he's trying to do with the program there and whatever. But the zone defense, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was like, oh, they texted for like 30 minutes. I'm thinking, oh, that probably, I'm assuming, I felt like what was known about how to attack that defense would have taken far, far less time than that.
Yes.
Hey, I'm going to go run and grab something else to drink. I'll be right back.
Okay. So Chronic, let's see. We'll definitely get to these first two questions. So we'll talk about your favorite IU memory. Then we'll get to Josiah's question, and then Alex's question will be next. And then, as always, if we don't get to these questions, now we have the Monday mailbag. So Ryan will be around. He'll be able to answer some of them. So we'll get the extras then. So we'll just see how many we can hit here. Oh, man. I can't believe next Thursday we're going to be doing a post-game show at this time.
I know that hit me like a ton of bricks in the face this morning when I realized we're a week away from actual basketball in Assembly Hall.
Yeah.
It was the best cup of coffee I've ever had. I'm ready for it.
I'm so ready.
couple in the fact that IU football has reached that point where, like, okay, it's almost time officially. We'll see where we're at, this time tomorrow night.
They don't win tomorrow. Then I think those who have hung on at this point will be exiting the ride.
They got problems.
Yes.
Yes, they do.
They do. They do. Okay.
All right.
Let's do segment number 4. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. We are wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. I am Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and our special guest co-host this week, Chronic Hoosier. If you ever have a question for the show, just send us a tweet at Assembly Call, or better yet, leave us a voicemail with your questions. The voicemail line is 317-762-6253. That's 317-ROB-MAKE. You can leave a voicemail anytime, and we can then play your voice asking your question here on the show. We did not have any of those submitted this week, so let's go to some of our written questions. And Chronic, we have one specifically for you from our good friend at IU Artifacts. What is Chronic's favorite IUBB memory?
Tijon accepted my friend request.
There you go. I don't even need to talk
And
anymore.
Moving on to the next question.
No, a close run up to that. I did shake Tijon's hand at an ATM here in town once. That's pretty big on the list as well. I still haven't washed. I saw that question earlier today. I tried to think of a great. There's just so many of them. Probably the deepest or the realest, but it's kind of cheap too. Every game I got to go to with my dad. I mean, it's one of those things that for the rest of my life, I will always remember the feeling. And that's what it really is. It's just that visceral feeling of driving over with them. The landmarks we passed, the places we'd go pre-game, post-game, walking into the hall with them. Win or lose, it was always one of the best days ever. Probably a tie between, as far as personal experience, individual games. The Watt shot was just, it was out of this world. The hall was like I've never seen it. And we literally broke the gym. It cracked the cinder block walls. But I also wonder if that's not a recency factor. Being in Bloomington for the Oklahoma game in 2002, I got to watch it with my brother and a bunch of my close friends, my college friends as well. And then to go to Kirkwood afterwards. And the first time that we saw it at the Watt shot, but it was a whole nother level to be on campus when, there's students in the fountain and Kirkwood is completely shut down for a couple of blocks in all directions. And just to see Bloomington at its most hysterical. It's one of those moments you'll carry with you for the rest of your life and remember like it was yesterday.
Andy, what's your favorite IU memory? I know we've talked about this before, but
boy, I don't know. I mean, I still remember, Smart hitting the shot in 87 and kind of jumping around with my, my parents, and that, I don't know. I guess I would say that, although, certainly some of those memories with the, the Chaney era teams would fall right up there. When they smoked UCLA to get to the Final Four that year, just for them to kind of get over that hump and get there. I remember that pretty well. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know that I have one. How can you pick one?
I know. Well, yeah, it's hard, but it's one of the things, like Chronic said, it's that feeling. Like, to me, it's when Calvert broke the scoring record against Northwestern, because that was just like right in my sweet spot, and it felt like it was just the culmination of his entire career. And like, just for a specific moment, like hearing all of Assembly Hall just go silent when that shot went up, and then just erupting as the shot goes in. I'll never forget that specific moment. And actually being there, kind of helps it sink in. But obviously the 2002 run is kind of the best, like, kind of sequence of events. But single moment for me is Calvert breaking the Big Ten scoring record.
I will say definitively, if you had to isolate one game that was the pinnacle of my IU experience, just Indiana basketball as a whole, regional finals, Damon Bailey's junior year, Pat Graham's senior year, Seymour, B&L versus Floyd Central, Barney Scott Gymnasium in Seymour. It was as close to a moment like I was living in the movie Hoosiers as I probably ever experienced in my life. It took us 15, 20 minutes to turn off of our road because of the stream of traffic coming from Bedford just to get to the gym. Capacity crash. It's just the greatest basketball game greatest basketball experience ever. And even being at the Watt shot, it's still miles ahead of that.
That's awesome. Okay, let's go to Josiah's question. So once the games start, what will cause our first significant overreaction as fans this year? Andy, what do you think? First overreaction. Hopefully no one overreacts anything against Chicago State, because that is not any type of competition.
That would be one. I feel like no one should react to that game at all. They're all these like 1 to 353 rankings. I think they are close to the bottom in every single one of them. So
let's remember that, since we will be hosting a post-game show. No.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean that we won't overreact, but of the ones that I've captured, this is out of 353 teams, 347, 347, 347, and 344. So consistently poor. So I don't think it will come in that game. If I had to guess about an aspect of the game, I think people would overreact to like point guard play in general. I don't know whether it will be good or bad. I kind of hope that it's good. But I think you could see people overreacting if Devontae struggles and saying, all right, we need to turn to Finney, or if he plays really well, all of our problems are solved. Everything is fine. I could see that really being the driver a few games in of this was the big question mark. Now we either have the answer or it's time to panic a little bit.
Chronic, what do you think? What will cause the first overreaction?
Romeo not averaging 20 points a game for the first, month of the season, as the offense kind of figures out what its rhythm is. I could foresee a loss at Arkansas, perhaps by close to double digits, because of its placement in the schedule. That's I don't want to call it a trap game necessarily, but it's certainly one where the degree of difficulty is perhaps a little bit greater than what I think most people want to give it credit for. True road game, decent team that time of the season, just has potential to get a little squirrely on IU. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, that's what Hoosiers do better than almost anybody in the country, save maybe Wildcats, is overreact. So it's a Pandora's box that I can't wait to open. I'll be leading the charge.
Yeah, I actually think whatever happens in the Marquette game will cause an overreaction, because I think it's going to be such a charged atmosphere. It's the first big game. If we win it, because Marquette is, good, like a kind of consensus top 30 team, everybody's going to get real excited and, just the optimism will go up even more. But if we lose it and it's a home game, then I think people will overact to losing a game at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. So I think whatever happens that game, there's going to be some overreactions.
I think that's reasonable.
Let me also add the first time that Romeo goes down with a knock.
Oh boy.
And is slow to get up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same thing with Juwan. I mean, I think we all still kind of shudder anytime Juwan hits the deck, just because of, those first 2 years with the injuries. So anyway, someone knock on some wood or something. Okay. So let's hit this one quick. We've got about a minute and a half left for this segment. So this is from Alex. He says, overall, what do you think will be the greatest asset to the team this year? Romeo or the improved depth? He said he could see it going both ways, which has the makings of a good debate. Andy, I'll go to you with this first. What do you think would be the greatest asset to the team this year?
I would say Romeo. I mean, based on what I brought up and the question we had earlier, I think the depth is certainly a huge factor, but just to have a game changer like that, think about what having a guy like him, even on last year's team, would have meant. If it means 3 or 4 more wins, you're probably in the NCAA tournament. So I think that to me is the big one, and take some of the pressure off of Juwan, where he doesn't have to carry as much, that you don't watch him go off the floor for 30 seconds and freak out that the game is going to get away from you.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it's Romeo, just because one guy can make such a big difference in basketball, and the depth is great, but you still need kind of the superstar player to put you over the top. Chronic, what do you think?
I totally agree. I think all the points are spot on, pretty valid. I would also add that, whenever you've got a kid that's projecting lottery, that's an instant upcharge to your offense, to your team as a whole. But I think one of the greatest attributes to Romeo's addition to this roster is probably going to be the way in which he can create more space for other people to move in the offense, and just open up a whole lot more, just a number of elements that weren't present.
Andy, we've got about 10 seconds left. Which stat do you think will see the most improvement this year, the 3-point percentage or the free throw percentage, and why?
I'd say free throw percentage. I think it'll be I certainly hope both improve, but I'll say free throw percentage.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. All righty. That is going to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat
mobbers,
join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. Next Thursday is the first post-game show of the season. Get excited. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
This was the most ridiculous ordeal of my life.
And wrap.
At some point, you got to do like a public soundboard with this trove that you're sitting on now.
That would be kind of funny.
I mean, I was at some points getting interrupted by myself, and that was the most meta mindfuck I've ever had to experience, I think. And then I was cracking myself up, and it took me like 2 or 3 of those before I even realized that was me. Like the first time you dropped the coupons one, I'm like, what?
When I heard you say that, it made me laugh so loud. You were talking about Jameson and like how you needed to be sponsored by Jameson. And like I think you like said that you reached out to them or something.
I've tweeted at him a number of times.
I was wondering the background behind that one. Some of the others I could at least kind of place, but I was like, why would he ever have been asking for coupons?
That was so far out of context that I didn't even know it was I didn't know it was my voice.
Yeah.
Oh God. And I'm still on that. I've actually escalated that war. Big Red has since launched their own brand of Irish whiskey. They have their own like private label now.
Oh, really?
In order to push the sales of it, they've jacked the price of its biggest competitors. So now Jameson's going for like $60 a handle, which is about $11 more expensive than what it is at the Kroger 200 yards away. And then all the while, as soon as you cross the Ohio River and get into bourbon country, you can get handles of Jameson for $39 with perks like buy 6, get 1 free, punch cards, coupons, free t-shirts. They really juice the sales there. I'm extremely bitter about this development.
That was kind of an abomination.
Mm-hmm. So I think Chad is going to hop on with us here. We'll see if we'll hang around here for a couple of minutes. Hopefully he got the link. I'll check my email to see if he got the link. Yeah, I've got, I'm amassing a trove. I have like 7 pages of Ryan sound bites.
7 pages of Ryan, 0 pages of yourself. And
no,
then...
I added one. I added my first soundbite from this past week. It's just awkward. I can't tell like what's funny of what I say. I feel like I can recognize what's funny what other people say. Here's the only soundbite that I have of myself so far. I can do what LeBron can do. I promise. In context, it made sense, but
if I just got to read out of that without your voice, I'd swear it was Skip Bayless.
Oh no. Actually, that's going to be a good drop that we can use on Ryan sometime. So thank you for saying that. Oh man. So hopefully Chad can come hang out. So are you going to the Southern Indiana game, Chronic?
Yes. Right now, I think I'm looking pretty good for the whole season. Obviously things are going to pop up. No, I'm like I said, I'm pretty excited about this one. I'm actually trying to circle what road games. Speaking of road games, Galen and I are going to Duke.
Oh, you guys have to plan some kind of content.
So I think we're going to try and do some live stuff on the way down, maybe some stuff on campus. So last time we were there's this country club that's right on Duke's campus, right on the edge of campus. It's only like a 5-10 minute walk to Cameron from there. And they basically let IU take it over last time, which was amazing because they've got mini bars and it's a gorgeous old, you're down in tobacco country, everything you'd expect a country club at a school like that to be. So maybe we'll get it down there and check that out in advance. I don't know how much we'll be able to do as far as contenting there, but we got some stuff in store. I'm really excited.
If we win that game, I'm going to send you the link to Zoom. So if we win that game, you guys need to pop on the post-game show and we'll just take in like 5 minutes of the ambiance.
I'll even drop the video block, and I'll be that guy with my ass out, literally at center court at Cameron Arena. My actual ass out.
Oh, that would be awesome.
It's just a blip, Coach K. It's just a blip.
This is not what's happening. Not what's happening. Well, Chronic, feel free to hang around. We when we do these chat mob inductions now, we like to bring the chat mob inductee on the show afterwards. So it's awesome, Chad, to have you on here. This is like the first time we've ever actually had a chance to talk. This is cool.
Yeah, it's great to be on, guys. It's been awesome watching and listening to you guys for so long, and then very strange to see myself in a window with you guys. So
no, man, it's awesome. We really appreciate just, all the support that you've given and how active you are. So it's really, it's awesome, man. And if I didn't say this earlier, but we need to, give out some of this vital information. Your favorite player is AJ Guyton. Your favorite moment was going to your first March Madness as a kid. When was that? Who was playing? Do you remember?
It probably was early 90s when that happened. I can't even remember. I mean, I think it was AJ Times. I think that was kind of one of the reasons he became one of my favorite players, was seeing him in person as a kid and looking up to him and watching him play was just such a big thing.
Yeah.
Hey, Chad, Chronic here. Where are you from, man?
I'm from Bloomington originally. I grew up, I went to Bloomington South. I actually lived next door to the Hall's family for a little while, and was in the same class as his older brother, JC.
Yeah.
And I can remember seeing Jordy outside shooting hoops. This young little blonde kid was always outside shooting hoops. And now we see why, and the benefit of those hoops. So it's kind of weird to see that.
So you were in the high hood before you in the chat mob.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What elementary school did you go to, Chad?
I wasn't there for elementary. I moved in 7th grade and went to bachelor.
That's funny. I moved out. I went to bachelor for the first half of 7th grade and then moved, but was there up until then. I would have gone to South. But
so then where are you now?
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
All right.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize you were in Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
Are you so how far is that from Durham?
Probably about 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
It'd be tempting to go, but
yeah. Huh. So what are your kind of thoughts on this season's team? I mean, just seeing the notes that you put in chat, I know you're as excited as we are, but what are like some of the specific things that have you going about the squad?
Well, it's like you said, the depth of it. The mentions that we said that it could be a platoon team. Obviously, we shouldn't do that, but just that we're able to have that discussion is amazing. And having a team where we can talk this offseason so much with so many questions around it, but still be so excited and still be so upbeat is an amazing thing. And to think that we are less than 6 days away from starting to have answers to those questions is just great. I mean, that's a lot of people in the chat were saying tonight, even too. I'm so excited. I can't remember the last time I've been excited about a team like this one. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. Who are we kidding? The first half of Chicago State is when the overreaction is going to happen, because everybody's just like so excited to actually get a game. Once we actually have some data to react to, we're all going to overreact. That's just.
Well, I think all of us did that a little bit too during Hoosier Hysteria, during the scrimmage. It was just a scrimmage, but we're scrambling so much for answers that we're finding meaning in nothing in a scrimmage.
Yeah, I know. Who would do a post-game show after a scrimmage?
Yeah. Who would do a tailgate?
Yeah, fools. So obviously Ryan isn't here. Tell us what you like best about the show when Ryan is not on it.
Come on, dude.
I don't know. I mean, there's lots of great moments. It's like you said, being involved, listening to the repeats or listening to it on radio is one thing, but being involved in the chat, being there for YouTube and everything, hearing the stuff in between, you get to know you guys a lot better. And you can listen to a lot of other podcasts and even listen to them live or whatever. And you guys really involve the chat and get us involved in the show with you. And that makes the audience feel a lot more involved and a lot more enthusiastic about what you guys are saying and what's going on with the content as well.
Do you like that it's YouTube only, for like that we don't just play all the like the between segment stuff on the podcast? Because I've thought about that.
Yeah, I like
the
the
right
two-tube only. It's nice to be in one spot, just have one spot to go to. Like you said earlier, I think it's going to get a little wild once the games start with how many people are watching. And that's kind of maybe a PSA to say to the fellow chat mobbers right now, we got to realize we need to not engage any people that are there doing ill will or that are trolling and everything. Just block them, ignore them. They're just there to get a rise out of us. Just try to just block them. Don't even engage.
Yeah, because you can flag those people, right? Like if they come in making crazy comments.
Well, Hoosier hysteria. There was a guy that was a Duke fan that was doing that, and a lot of us blocked him and got him out of there. So
I also don't like Duke fans.
I can't even imagine what is going on in your life as a Duke fan. They're like, you know what I'm going to do on this fine Saturday evening in late September. I'm going to go on and try to piss off IU fans after a practice.
Yeah, I don't know.
Granted, there are probably a lot of other people thinking, why are these people on here talking about a practice? But that's neither here nor there.
Well, and that's an interesting thing to mention. Being in the South now and being around Duke fans and North Carolina fans and having a lot of friends that are fans, big fans of each of those programs. Our level of fandom as IU basketball fans and Hoosiers is on such a different level than with those guys, because I've engaged with a few of them, and I can't speak of specifics, but I can remember speaking about recruiting for a certain player that had interest. Maybe it might have been Trace Jackson or someone else, but had interest in IU and North Carolina. And I lost the person once I started to talk about recruits. They just don't go as deep, I don't think, as a normal fan base as we do.
So, Chad, I want to ask you a question. I actually want to get Chronic's answer to this too, since he's still here with us. And I kind of like asking everybody who comes on here this question, but what does being an IU fan mean to you, and why, now that you're out in Charlotte, do you stay so engaged with IU and with the basketball program to the point of coming and hanging out with us on a Thursday night, talking about a team whose season hasn't even started yet?
I think it's a family thing. It's something that many people are brought in as children. My dad went to IU. My dad was an IU professor. A lot of you actually heard him sing the national anthem. He used to sing it when the regular gentleman, I can't remember his name, used to sing it. He would sing the anthem.
Oh, wow.
And I think that has a lot to do with it. And then just being away from it, you reach out to find any information you can. I think that's when I first kind of found you guys, was just wanting more information and not living close enough to have the news articles or anything like that, and be able to talk with people on the street about it. You kind of reach out for what you can find out. And after I lived in Indiana, I moved to Los Angeles for a little bit, and out there it was even harder, especially with the team struggling like it was. They weren't on national TV. Finding coverage of the games and everything was a lot harder. Now with the prestige of this program and the excitement and the trajectory that it's headed to, there's a lot more to sink your teeth into and find.
Chronic, what about you? I mean, because you're as engaged as anybody.
It's kind of weird to see it when you're in the middle of it, I guess. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, it's one of those things that you're just acclimated to your entire life. It's almost like the weather, when there's nothing to talk about, there's always something to talk about when it relates to IU sports. It's just one of those ties that binds everybody. Likewise, I'm a legacy. My dad, I got 3 degrees from IU. He played football and rugby at IU. So even when I was born in Bloomington, but I always, shortly thereafter we moved, but I've always been about an hour away. So we were always in close contact with the school, with the athletic teams. So much of it is just those experiences that are shared with family, with friends. We're tribal, and it's just the tribe that we were kind of born into. But it's very much, when you grow up in a smaller Indiana town, I think it becomes such an integral part of your identity. I still remember coming over for games, and a couple times a year we could go over to TIS and we could up our sweatpant game, And it was just the greatest feeling in the world to go to school the next day with, some dope new sweats, and people knew whose side you were on. And, there were some Purdue fans, some Kentucky fans, but it was very much the dominant tribe in the area, and it was something you wanted to be a part of. And then growing up, it's weird because when I moved away from Indiana, I've only had residence in one other state permanently, I guess, since I was 1. We lived in Ada, Ohio for a bit when my dad started law school at Ohio Northern, and then we moved back to Indiana. But when I moved out west, it was right at the advent of the internet and some of the sports sites. And even before the sports sites, it was a whole lot cheaper to email my friends and talk about IU than it was to place long distance phone calls that could last for hours. So I just kind of got accustomed to opening up a computer, and that was kind of my porthole to IU when I was far, far away from it. And then as the technology developed and the communities were created and all the content started to go online, it was natural that's where I went. And then you brought in the advent of social media, and now all of a sudden, we're not just reading about it. We can actually have real-time conversations and connect with everybody involved in it, be it fans, writers, even the athletes. And, that's the thing I think, because it's, we talked about this beforehand, Jerod, we're fans, we have lives and jobs and families, and this is something that we do out of passion and whatever. But, there are times, especially during football season, but also during the off season, where it gets a little laborious. And, I've tried to balance, like in the summertime now, I'll turn off my notifications for days, if not a couple weeks on end, just so that I can kind of step back from it. I experienced a lot of burnout, at least personally, at the back end of the Tom Crean era. It was causing a lot more strife than it was delivering happiness. But it was also happening at a time where kind of my engagement was increasing. And, the obligation to do more things, to be more engaged, to be more available, when, internally I wanted to withdraw a little bit from it because it was causing me pain, like deep, real, actual pain. So that was tough. And then also realizing that, now I've got there's a voice that's amplified, and, other people give it a whole lot more credence than I do as far as how impactful it is. But, when I'm getting messages from the program, from the coach, even from the goddamn team doctor, it's like, how did this even happen? And as crazy as that is, there's also those moments where, like, you and I meet, and all the great people I've been able to literally become friends with, on a personal level, aside from IU. It's wonderful. And I think more than anything, that's really what keeps bringing me back.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you guys both mentioned, being away. I think in some cases makes it different. I mean, I know when I graduated, I moved to Cincinnati, and it's still a pretty big, like, hotbed here for college basketball between Cincinnati and Xavier and Kentucky fans and Louisville and everybody. So it's kind of like a melting pot. Well, then we were in Cleveland when we started doing the show, and it was like, nobody cares about college basketball there at all. Cause nobody really, Ohio State football is kind of the only thing that anybody really cares about. The Browns were terrible at that point. The Indians were not particularly good. LeBron left the Cavs the first time when we lived there. So, it was kind of Ohio State football, and, like, I was so into college basketball, and it just felt very, like, disconnected with, nobody else around really had that same excitement for not even just IU, but just the sport in general. But that's the one thing about, then being back in Cincinnati now, at least there's that. But I mean, that was, I don't know. I think that was a big thing for me, even, like, starting the show. It was a good way to, like, talk about it with somebody that you couldn't just come into the office and, like, have a good conversation about, college basketball, versus, like, when I lived here before, when IU beat Duke in the on the way to the Final Four that year, all the Kentucky fans hated Duke so much that it was like, I walked in the office and it was like I had played in the game. They're like, "Oh, congratulations. Great." I was so excited. And I was like, I actually didn't really do anything, and then sit on my couch and drink beer and swear at things and try not to throw things. But it was kind of funny. But I mean, I do think that's part of it, is like, I think you being away sometimes makes you, when you're in Bloomington, like, that sports in general, but basketball in particular, like, really connects everybody, and being away, you kind of want to get that back a little bit, because that's such a, just a big part of the experience there when you're, a fan that kind of grew up on it and different things like that. So kind of funny that you guys mentioned that part.
When you're in Bloomington, you can expect to go up to someone wearing an IU hat and drum up a conversation with a stranger about, hey, did you see that game? Did you see this? Or did you hear that news or this or that? And you guys might attest to this being in a different state. I've gone up to people that have an IU hat on down here and start drumming up stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, I just went there. I don't know what you're talking about.
What is wrong with you? No, it's funny. My daughter had basketball practice last night and she's playing a different team. And so one of the guys that was coaching, I walked in and I had an IU shirt on and he was like, oh, I went to IU. He's like, are you a big fan? Whatever. And it was kind of funny. So, he said I think he was there during the Cheney years. So he was like, oh, what years were you there? And I was like, nothing too great really happened while I was there, except that I thought I might see Bob Knight murder Ted Valentine. But I was like, yeah, but other than that,
No, so, that is one thing I love too, though, when you're away and you got your IU gear on, without fail, like the further away you go, the higher the likelihood that somebody's going to approach you and they were an alum, or, there's some connection to the school. But what I think what's most amazing too, is just the joy that those memories bring to them and the way in which we kind of share all of that, even people who were there when nothing too marked or, too memorable happened. I don't know. It's just that connection, I think, that brings us back to this town, the state. That was my Dorothy, I'm not in Kansas moment anymore in grad school. I was trying to find the NCAA tournament in Portland, Oregon in 2001. And I found one bar that had a satellite package, and I show up and I raced in 10 minutes before tip off, and I figured the bar would be packed with people watching basketball. And there were just a couple dudes in flannel shirts watching like X Games or something on the TV. And they all looked at me like I had, like I had 3 eyeballs when I asked if you could turn on NCAA basketball. And they're like, why?
Too much, too often in Indiana, people are looking backwards.
Shut up, Ryan.
There's way more validity to that statement than what you probably Hey, you know what, too, though? I did want to throw in Chad. You're talking about your dad singing.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Tim Noble? Was that the anthem singer perhaps that he filled in for?
Yes, that's ringing a bell. I believe so. Yes.
School of Music professor emeritus.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yes.
My dad, if any of you knew, my dad used to, he directed the Singing Hoosiers.
Okay.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I know it's getting late, Chad. I'm so glad that we had this chance to do this. And hopefully, do you have any plans to get to Bloomington for any games?
I will be up over Christmas, so I'll be there for the Illinois game.
Oh, you will be? Awesome.
We have some very close family friends that have some very, very nice floor seats. So once the schedule came out, I immediately emailed him and said I would like to have dibs on 2 tickets for that game. So I will be there for that.
Awesome, man. Are there any questions that we can answer for you, or any kind of final thoughts, words of wisdom that you want to give to fellow chat mobbers?
There is a question, but I won't ask it directly. I will just promise that I will find out the answer to this question. I promise that one of these days I will find out Andy's address, and I will deliver a pizza to that door right behind him during one of these games, during one of these shows.
We have had conversations. We have had conversations about this. It's our basement door that like nobody ever comes to.
I'm amazed. I'm amazed you said that much, that it's the basement door. You're giving away way too much.
Andy. I know. I did. I've told you that before, though. So that's not new. That's not new information. But yeah,
I'll give you my address if you want to show up at the handle of Jameson in the middle of the day. I'll buy you a pizza.
Oh man!
Can a brother get some coupons?
Oh man! All right.
I mean, I don't have any direct questions. I mean, I think we've the questions are all out there, and once the games come, we'll have wonderful girth of new things to talk about. Finally.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I'm gonna go say hi to my wife before she goes to sleep. Hopefully she waited up for me. We will see. But Chronic, thank you for coming and hanging out with us.
Hey, thank you guys for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Ryan didn't think we could do it, but we weathered his absence okay.
Somehow we may do.
Somehow we may do. Chad, thanks for everything, man. And just appreciate you there in the chat mob, and we look forward to seeing you there on Thursday nights and post-game shows throughout the season. It's going to be a fun one.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right,
cool. Talk to you guys
later.
later.
A good night, everybody. We will talk to you Monday for Banner Monday, and then first post game show of the season coming next week. We'll talk to you all.
Guys.
See you, everybody.